The unpleasant odor struck the ambassadors like a damp slap to the face. It was so overpowering and repulsive that they began to gag before even approaching the throne room. Imagine the most dreadful smell you have ever encountered. Picture a decaying animal baking in the sun, combined with rotten eggs and a clogged toilet. That was the scent of King James I of England. And that was on a good day. This is the same monarch who provided us with the King James Bible, which millions continue to read today. However, the reality is that he had not taken a proper bath in years. His tongue was excessively large for his mouth, resulting in constant drooling, and his garments were infested with lice. Court attendees claimed that one could actually observe the tiny insects leaping about as if they were celebrating. The most astonishing part is that he was not even the most repulsive individual. Things are about to become significantly more grotesque. Absolute power not only corrupts but also diminishes one's mental faculties. In this episode, we will be counting down 11 royal leaders with habits that are so peculiar, so revolting, and so utterly insane that you will be relieved not to be wearing a crown. Let us begin our descent into madness with number 11, Charles V, the Sixth of France. Surprisingly, he is actually one of the more sane individuals on this list. Charles suffered from a condition known as glass delusions. He genuinely believed that his entire body was composed of glass. If anyone were to touch him, he feared he would shatter into countless fragments like a wine glass dropped onto stone. This was not merely a fleeting thought, it constituted his everyday reality. He moved cautiously, step by step, as if every action could cause him to crack. He had special iron rods sewn into his clothing to shield him from breaking. Furthermore, no one, under any circumstances, was permitted to touch him. He even sat down in a slow, deliberate manner, terrified that his bones might splinter, and consider this, there were times when he would forget he was even a king. A servant would knock and announce, "Your Majesty, the council is waiting." Charles would respond with a look of confusion. "Council? What council? Who am I?" "You are the king, sire." "Oh, right. Now here's the truly peculiar aspect. This glass madness was not limited to Charles alone. During the Middle Ages, numerous nobles subscribed to similar beliefs. They referred to it as scholar's melancholy. It was thought that excessive reading, intense studying, or overexerting one's intellect could genuinely lead to a breakdown of the mind. For some unfortunate individuals, this indeed occurred. It resembles the modern-day notion that Wi-Fi causes headaches or that microwaves are spying on them. The same sentiment, just a different century. Number 10, Peter III of Russia. If you assume dolls were merely for children, reconsider. Peter was the emperor of all Russia. However, mentally he resided in a playroom. He not only collected dolls but also engaged with them. He assigned them names, voices, and personalities. He orchestrated little wars and acted them out as a child would with action figures. Yet here's where it becomes particularly unsettling. He did not confine this activity to the privacy of his chamber. He compelled his wife, indeed, Catherine the Great, along with all the royal courtiers, to participate every night until the early hours of 2 or 3 in the morning. Envision being a future legendary empress forced to create squeaky voices for toy soldiers at bedtime while rumors circulate that Catherine orchestrated his demise. The official narrative claims he succumbed to hemorrhoidal colic, essentially an extreme case of butt pain. However, let us be candid, if your husband is the most powerful man in Russia and insists on playing with dolls every night only to suddenly pass away from severe butt issues, that cannot be mere coincidence. That is a crime of exhaustion. However, there is more to the story. Peter developed an intense fascination with Prussia. He donned Prussian uniforms, refused to communicate in Russian, and even conducted a military trial for a rat. Indeed, a rat. The reason? The rat had gnawed on his toy soldiers. Consequently, Peter organized a complete court-martial, accused the rat of treason, and ultimately released it, claiming it had chewed with the appropriate Prussian discipline. This is truly unbelievable. This illustrates the effects of power on individuals. Moving on to number 9, we have Farouk of Egypt. This individual possessed wealth, authority, opulent residences, luxury vehicles, and over 1,000 exquisite suits. Yet, he chose to spend his leisure time engaging in pickpocketing. Indeed, King Farouk was a kleptomaniac, a royal thief. Winston Churchill once encountered him and left without his watch, which Farouk had stealthily taken. Attendees at state banquets would often find themselves missing rings, medals, and wallets. He even honed his sleight of hand skills purely for amusement, referring to it as the hand of the thief. Can you imagine being so affluent that you steal for fun? Furthermore, he had an obsession with the color red, owning hundreds of red cars. He established a decree that no one else in Egypt could possess a red car, only himself. If he spotted one on the road, he would have it seized. On one occasion, he noticed a red car driving by and shot out its tires only to discover it belonged to a foreign diplomat. Oops. Additionally, he amassed the largest collection of adult films in the world, exceeding 10,000 items, claiming it was for educational purposes. Sure, Farouk. He also became exceedingly large to the extent that restaurants had to remove the arms from chairs to accommodate him. During meals, he would order every dish available on the menu and then complain of still being hungry. This man had it all yet craved more, even if it meant taking from others. Number 8. King Martin of Aragon. He was affectionately known as Martin the Humane, a rather ironic nickname considering he met an incredibly foolish end. In 1410, after consuming an entire goose by himself, he felt bloated and uneasy. To lift his spirits, his jester entered with a joke. The punchline involved a deer hanging by its tail from a tree for stealing figs. That was the entirety of the joke. It was hardly amusing. Nevertheless, Martin found it uproarious. He laughed uncontrollably for 3 hours. His laughter became so intense that he struggled to breathe, turned purple, toppled from his chair, and ultimately died. This was a case of death by fig joke. Imagine being the jester. Your role is to amuse the king, and you succeed to such an extent that your joke brings about the end of the monarchy. Number 7. Christian II of Denmark. This individual was a complete calamity. He was utterly unqualified to govern and likely required medical assistance, yet he was crowned king. He harbored a rather private obsession which was so excessive that his physicians provided him with a special chair to avoid injury. You can infer the rest, but that was merely the beginning. He would randomly slap individuals, guests, politicians, anyone in proximity during peace negotiations, at royal weddings, and even at dinner. He would race through the palace at night, damaging furniture, tearing down artwork, and shouting incoherently. On one occasion, he appointed his dog as a government minister and expected people to heed its advice. Additionally, he had a fondness for leapfrog, but not with children. No, he insisted that ambassadors engage in leapfrog with him while dressed in full court attire. You arrived to discuss international trade and found yourself hopping through the throne room like a schoolboy. Number 6. Caligula, the Emperor of Rome. This man was born into privilege and promptly lost his sanity. Let us begin with his horse in Sardis. Caligula provided him with marble stables, gold feeding bowls, purple garments, and attendants. He extended invitations to the horse for dinner gatherings, served it wine, engaged in discussions about politics with it, and indeed, he intended to elevate it to the status of a Roman senator. Furthermore, he proclaimed himself a living deity. He would don the attire of Jupiter one day, and Venus the next, commanding temples to conduct rituals exclusively for him. In a bid to disprove a fortune-teller, he constructed a 3-mile-long floating bridge across a bay solely to ride across it in stolen armor. This is not leadership, it is sheer theatrical insanity. Number 5. King Ludwig II of Bavaria, famously known as the Swan King. And indeed, it is as peculiar as it appears. He had a fascination with fairy tales and opera, erecting castles that resembled Disney fantasies. One of these castles served as inspiration for the actual Disney castle. He did not merely construct them, he resided in them like a prince from a storybook. He donned medieval garments, glided in shell-shaped boats beneath artificial waterfalls, and rode sleds during the summer. He was entirely nocturnal, resting during the day, and convened meetings at midnight. His most bizarre practice involved hosting dinner parties for deceased royals. He instructed his servants to set the table, pour wine, and serve meals for guests who were absent, such as Louis XIV and Marie Antoinette, conversing with them as if they were present. Haunted dinners occurred every night. Number 4. Ibrahim the Mad, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. After spending 22 years in confinement, Ibrahim finally attained power and completely lost his grip on reality. He developed an obsession with fur, adorning walls, floors, and even ceilings with it. He enveloped himself in fur blankets even during the sweltering summer months in Istanbul. However, the situation grew darker. He harbored a fixation on large women, demanding that the heaviest woman in the empire be brought to him. They presented him with Sheikh Parar, a woman weighing 330 pounds. He made her a royal favorite and appointed her as the governor of Damascus. Even worse, he became increasingly paranoid that his wives were being unfaithful. One night, he ordered the drowning of 280 women from his harem in the sea, with only one surviving to recount the tale. Number 3 is Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. This man who unified China ultimately poisoned himself in his quest for immortality. He ingested mercury pills on a daily basis and even bathed in mercury, believing it would grant him eternal life. Spoiler alert, it did not. He constructed 270 palaces, all interconnected by secret tunnels to evade assassins. His fear of books and scholars led him to burn nearly every book in the empire and entomb 460 scholars alive for daring to question his authority. Upon his death, his officials concealed the truth. They placed his decaying body in a wagon, encircled it with barrels of dead fish to mask the odor, and traveled for weeks while pretending he was still alive. Number 2 is Adolf Fredrik, the King of Sweden, who literally ate himself to death. His last meal was a catastrophe consisting of lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, champagne, and 14 cream buns. Yes, 14. He rose from the table, collapsed, and perished. That is his legacy, not wars or policies, but simply the king who could not refrain from eating. Finally, number 1 is Henry VIII of England. While many are aware of his 6 wives, few discuss the horror his body became. By the end of his life, Henry weighed 400 pounds, was covered in sores, and had a leg wound that oozed pus daily. He was too large to walk, too wide to pass through doorways, and required ropes to be hoisted onto the toilet. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. His urine emitted a sweet odor, attracting flies that perpetually hovered around him. Despite his refusal to bathe, he demanded elaborate portraits that portrayed him as slim and robust. Upon his death, his body ruptured due to the gases within. His coffin burst open, and dogs lapped up the fluids that seeped onto the palace floor. A king who departed in a dramatic fashion. So, what can we learn from this? Absolute power not only corrupts but also distorts individuals. After hearing all of this, the mundane politicians in their ties seem rather appealing, don't they?